All right. Y'all ready to count them up?
Let's do it.
As much as I think it's the under is a safe play, like I can't even.
Count them up. Count them up. How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there. It's not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
We begin at the top of the odds board for the win totals with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Woo! Caesar Sportsbook has this one at 11.5, plus 100 to the over, minus 120 to the under. We got that huge game against Miami in Atlanta. The rest of the non-con, though, Ron Mercer, Southern Miss, New Mexico State. The East draw does include one of, I would argue, the more difficult scenarios that you possibly could have from the SEC West. You got to go to the Swamp to play Florida. Then, of course, that Tennessee game that will be in Tuscaloosa. I don't want to speak for the rest of this podcast, but had that one as a dub, no matter the location. 11.5. Are we going with principles? Are we going with what we think's going to happen? How are we attacking this one?
I mean, principle, I have to go under.
Right.
Because it's really hard to go undefeated, but I'm going over. I don't know where Alabama's losing. And I know there's a ton of concern about everything that they have to replace and all that stuff, but man, they do that every year. They went from Tua and oh my God, how are they going to replace Tua? Well, Mac Jones comes in and Mac Jones is just as great in that offense. And while I do have some questions about how the offense is going to look, it's also incredibly talented. It has talented receivers. They'll have a good offensive line. They have a good quarterback. They have a good defense. And while Saban, it's hard to go undefeated for a full season. Saban, since in the playoff era, I think they've gone undefeated in the regular season 3 or 4 times. They've lost in the playoff, but they've gotten through the regular season 12-0, or they've lost in the SEC championship. I think, but
five times.
Yeah. So the Miami game in the open is tough, but Miami I have questions about, especially early in the season. I think Florida on the road in that third game is pretty difficult because that's Alabama's still going to be figuring itself out. So maybe that game could be closer than we expect, but I still think Alabama wins that game more often than not. Texas A&M on the road, I think Alabama probably wins that game more often than not because until, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, until the Aggies start showing that explosiveness on offense, I'm not going to give them credit. I'm not going to give them the ability to keep up with Alabama's offense over 60 minutes. So I just don't see an opponent on this schedule that I'm fairly fully confident in keeping up with Alabama for a full game. So I'm going 12-0.
They're going to be a double-digit favorite against everybody on their schedule.
You think they'll be double-digit against Texas A&M in College Station?
That's the one I was going to point to. Yeah, I'm going to take the under here, and I really like this Alabama team. I will note that I don't think Bama has been 11.5 ever, to my knowledge.
It's probably been at 11 a couple times, but never 11.5.
Correct. 11.5 is pretty wild. I think it is largely a reflection of what happened last year. But of all the teams in the SEC West, there's only 2 that I'm confident will not be as good as they were last year. And one of those teams is Alabama. I think a couple of teams in the West probably got a good bit better. And if you're betting this over, and I don't think, Tom, you maybe disagree. I'm probably not going to have this in my actual Locks Pod picks. But new QB, who I really like, but he's still new. New receivers, who I really like, but they're still new. New pieces in the secondary, again, who I like, but they're still new. I really think they're going to wreck people up front this year with the front seven in a way that they actually didn't do last year with Will Anderson and Tim Smith, who was one of my favorite prospects coming out. They flipped him from the Gators, down the stretch. But they have to run this at Florida, at A&M, at Auburn, Miami neutral, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home. The fact that their number is 11.5 suggests it is possible, perhaps very possible, to do so. I just don't think that I can't get there with the math betting over an 11.5 where there's 6 teams I think athletically can kind of run with them. You know what I mean? It's difficult for me to do. I'm high on a couple of these teams we'll talk about in a second. So I'm definitely a believer in Alabama. Alabama fans, I got you here, but for 11.5 for the picks pod that we're doing, I have to go ahead and take the under.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in Fornelli.
I know,
Tom,
you think
totally
you know a guy. You think
throwing
you
out
know a guy.
principles. Like I'm a
Somebody on this
principle
show has
guy.
got to stand for something, or you fall for
Yes.
anything. I think there's a country song that
Exactly.
talks about that.
11.5. This is insanity. You have to take the under here. And I think Bud, I totally agree with Bud's points. The schedule is tough, right? I think a quarterback, now this is the pro, like if De'Aaron King was healthy, I think that Miami game would be way more interesting. I'm kind of curious how much they're going to use him in the run game. And I don't think that's one of their losses. But I think A&M has proven to be closer. I think the Florida game in Gainesville could be an interesting one with a new look offense with Emory Jones and some, a better defense that could possibly pose some problems for Bryce Young in a first-time hostile environment that's there. First-year starting quarterback. I know they've replaced him like all of us felt pretty good about Spencer Rattler last year, stepping into Lincoln Riley's system too. And by all accounts, he flourished. He had a phenomenal year at the end of it, but early in the season, in some fourth quarter situations, he cost them games. He cost them 2 games with some bad throws. I don't even know if it comes down to Bryce Young making a similar mistake, but I also think Ole Miss last year was a handful offensively for Alabama's defense. They're going to be a little bit better defensively. Again, I don't think that's where a loss comes from, but it wouldn't shock me at the end of the season if you said, oh, that was the game where Nick Saban, Lane Kiffin pulled off one of these, surprises, and he's out there trolling him after the game, and yet Ole Miss maybe 8-4. I could also see that being the only loss on Alabama's schedule, and they go on to win a national championship. So much like Bud, this isn't a troll Alabama, you guys aren't that good. The schedule is a gauntlet. You've got a bunch of new pieces. We have Bill O'Brien taking over an offense, and we're just going to assume he's going to plug in, what Lane Kiffin was doing with all his college experience recently. Sark came, but he got to watch Lane. Then he kind of adapted. I think there's an adaptation period for Bill O'Brien too. So all of those factors, I'm going to take the under.
Ole Miss's defense is going to be better. It's only going to allow 8 touchdowns instead of 9.
Listen, Danny, I'm glad you mentioned that because, again, I think it is – I think the over is a bad bet, and sometimes bad bets hit. Just sort of principle under on this one. But the thing that I gravitated towards was I don't give all of my trust to Bill O'Brien and Doug Marrone and all the turnover that they've got, not only on the field with this offense, but also with this staff. You lose Steve Sarkisian, Jeff Banks, Charles Huff. I mean, you lose a lot of the brain trust of how they put together game plans during the week, how they call games on the weekend. I mean, Nick Saban running around. Like, I don't know if Bill O'Brien's, I imagine he's going to be an up in the press box guy. I don't know if he's going to be on the field. If he is smart, he's not on the field because he's going to get his ass chewed out by Nick Saban time and time again. And then one more thing, if anything happens to Bryce Young, guys, we're down to Bear Bryant's great-grandson. And if Bear Bryant's great-grandson is out there, 11-1 is 100% a possibility, especially considering some of these matchups. So, Tom, I'm surprised, but again, I would not be surprised to see a 12-0 in Alabama. They're that daggum good.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
Turning our attention to College Station, Texas A&M over under win total of 9.5 at Caesars Sportsbook, over priced at +110, the under at -130. The non-con includes Kent State at Colorado, New Mexico, Prairie View A&M, the draw from the East at Missouri, South Carolina coming to College Station. Guys, there's 6 wins right there.
Yes, that might be one of the easiest schedules out there in the non-conference and the crossover cross-division games.
So you just need 4 and 2 against division play. So what are we going to do with the Aggies as they look at obviously when you sort of put them in the power ranking? I'm assuming we all slot them below Alabama, but how do you order them against LSU, Ole Miss, that LSU game in Baton Rouge? How's everyone sorting this out? Do we like a 10-2? Do we like a 9-3? Or perhaps you're even one more win beyond that in either direction?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Give me the over. I think that, so a couple things. Number one, I really don't think Kellen Mond was that good of a QB. So I'm not completely concerned about the quarterback position here. And hey, this could be a freezing cold take, obviously, right? But I think that one of either Haynes King likely or Zach Calzada possibly could step up and do a really good job for them. My main concern for Texas A&M is whether they will open up the offense some, whether they will use more of these quote unquote college type concepts that maybe Jimbo thinks is kind of gimmicky, right? I know Bill Connolly wrote about this on ESPN, more motion, more downfield RPO. And they have not done a good job in this offense of developing receivers for the NFL. I think the only receiver who's played in this offense who's on an actual NFL roster, like not a practice squad, is Auden Tate. Like Rashad Green's not on one, Kelvin Benjamin ain't on one. I think Osmond could make the Eagles, I believe. But they have some real dudes here who can totally run. And I feel like this is the most receiver talent they've had on campus in a long time, because last year they had some real problems with guys opting out, guys getting hurt like Caleb Chapman, who could be a deep threat. I love their tight ends. I think even if Jimbo stays in his ways, and I think the game has gotten much more explosive around, the sport has become much more explosive while Jimbo's offenses have not kept pace on the passing explosiveness rating. Quick stat here. 2018 passing explosiveness, 97th. 2019, 118th. 2020, 99th. So this is a team that's really, really damn good in all these other areas, except they just never hit home runs through the air. I think this year they actually could hit some home runs through the air. I think he's probably seeing that. I mean, if you look at just how bad Bama torched them again last year with the home run play, I kind of believe this offense could break out this year. I think they've done a very nice job recruiting the offensive line position. So losing 4 starters there is a concern, but not, maybe as big of a one as I think it would be. And I think we will see much better ability covering the deep ball and playing good man coverage on the back end this year because of all the guys they bring back. They had some young pups who flashed last year, who I think will be much better on the defensive side of the ball. I like the over here. I like that we're getting plus money to the over. This is maybe showing some faith in this team that the past 3 years hasn't warranted as far as taking the next step on offense and not, again, becoming less explosive compared to the rest of the sport. But I'm willing to go there. So go ahead and give me the over.
I'll take the under. Styles make fights. Do y'all remember what happened when Jimbo and Lane played each other last year? Me neither. The game got postponed once, and then it was canceled. We never got to see Ole Miss and Texas A&M play. It is the biggest wild card sort of question mark for me as I'm trying to figure out how all these teams are going to stack up against each other. So I think that Texas A&M is an elite defensive team, but we've seen really good defensive teams, get torched. And so if that thing starts to get a little sideways and Texas A&M all of a sudden finds itself in a little bit of a hole, I think that is a dangerous game. I am, tipping my hand a little bit here. I kind of shade that one to Ole Miss just for the, kind of chaos, SEC. You never know what's going to happen. Kind of like Danny, your principle, your point in mentioning it in Alabama. At LSU is really tough, and I'll give them the loss against Alabama. I could be very wrong about Ole Miss, and I think that's the game where this one breaks the other way because, like I mentioned in the intro, I do think you've got 6 wins. Though at Missouri, hey, that would be another sort of spicy one right there.
After Alabama, too.
Ooh, good.
With all the chips on the table against Alabama, too. Like, that's all we've talked about is, are they closing the gap? And once again, that's the game that Jimbo and the A&M program is going to be judged against. If they come up short again, or if they're really close and come up short, like, or
Nerd is right there, just ready to get them in the hangover game.
Or if they get the shocking upset, like let's say they beat them at home, then there's the celebration factor. Like, oh, they're just cruising to a national championship. And then you could see a letdown there too. Although in all of these, I did not have at Columbia as one of the games that I had pegged as one of the 3 losses. Potential losses, because I'm taking the over. I think Jimbo is a good coach. I think this roster is really talented. I think the defense is physical enough. I think you got one of the better backs in the SEC. I don't think he opens it up that much. He is a stubborn individual. I don't think he's going to evolve until it's really kind of just glaringly obvious, which maybe an under win total on this one would do it. But I think this team is good enough to push around some of their opponents. The 3 potential losses I had were Bama. Ole Miss was one of my trap games. Like, that could be a loss. And LSU in Baton Rouge. Out of those 3, is he gonna lose all 3? No, I don't think so. I think he gets one of them, and it's probably Ole Miss or Baton Rouge, and he maybe gets them both. So I'm gonna take the over.
If he doesn't open it up, I want the under. Like, so one of the problems here is that on a down-to-down basis, A&M is a really, really good team. But their pace is just ridiculously slow. And so even though they're better on an efficiency basis than a lot of teams they play way too many close games because they do not get enough possessions, right? And like, great, you can be awesome, but if you only play an 11-possession game, it's just very hard to beat anybody by 2-3 scores. That's why you're not getting as many reps in for the backups. Haynes King only had 6 dropbacks last year because they play so damn slow. They're not blowing people out like they should by 30 in the fourth quarter. They were literally, in Bill Connolly's adjusted pace number, dead last in the entire country, right? 127th in adjusted pace. If they don't open this up, I want no business with the over here, because then that brings in games that they could lose, like Auburn. I think it makes Ole Miss, more likely that they lose. I don't like them all that much at Missouri if they don't open this up. I mean, if they just continue to try to just, run on first down, play super slow, play great defense, I want no part of that.
How much
But
do
I
you
think
hate
they will
time
open
of
up a little bit.
possession? How much do you hate time of possession stat? The third in the country last year, time of possession. So clearly they are playing slow, but a part of it is keeping the ball away from the other team so that Ole Miss may only have the ball, so they have less margin as well. Do you buy into that? Or is
No,
that an
definitely not.
antiquated way of thinking?
No, but here's the thing, though. Like, let's say you score a touchdown on every drive, right? And I score a field goal on every drive. If we only play 2 drives, I'm still within 8 points. This is the thing. Like, if let's say I'm plus 2 points per drive against you. It's kind of like if you have an edge in anything. Like if you're counting cards in blackjack, you want to play as many possible hands as you can if you have the edge. If you don't have the edge, the house wants you to play as many possible hands, right? Like if you're a good team, you should want to play more possessions so you can maximize your edge over more drives. If you're an underdog team, you should try to play as few as possible to try to keep the game close and hope the variance monster, kind of like coin flips your way. They play like a huge underdog team.
How many times has Texas A&M won 10 games in a season this century?
Ooh.
Regular season?
Once. 2012, the Johnny football year. That's it. I'm not taking an over for 10 for a team that hasn't proven it yet. Now, granted, they probably would have done it last year had they played a full schedule. They did finish 9-1, but that 9-1 finish and being number 5 in the poll kind of is what's convincing me that Jimbo's not going to change, because Jimbo's going to look at last year and say, well, I went 9-1 last year, nearly made the playoff doing it. Why do I need to change anything? And maybe he's right. Maybe his offense will be so efficient, and that defense, which I love, and has a ton of talented players, will be so good that he will be able to keep playing that way, and it will work for them, and they will compete, and they might beat Alabama. They will compete for a playoff spot, all that stuff. I just don't think that's the most likely outcome here. I think that, like what you're getting at, Bud, there's too much chance for trouble. You're giving your opponent a better chance to beat you than they probably deserve. And I look at that schedule. We mentioned Mizzou on the road after Alabama. That's kind of a trappy, kind of strange feely game. The other road games, Chip, like you mentioned, at Ole Miss. I think that's going to be a really tough game for the Aggies. At LSU, I think that's going to be a tough game. And then you go through the rest of the schedule. You've got Auburn. You've got Arkansas, which is I think they should win, but it's a rivalry, and it's been a pretty close, heated kind of rivalry in recent years. So I think that there's 2 losses on the schedule for sure, and I think there's a very good chance at 3. So I'm going under.
Arkansas is some tough out for the Aggies. Come on.
It is. Look at the history of that game when they've been playing it the last few years in Jerry World. It's been mostly 1-score games.
Okay.
And weird ones too.
Yeah.
The one reason why I have hope that he will change this, right, is this. 2018 win expectancy. Okay. They really, like, I'll give them a pass on that. They had a 0% against Alabama, right? Expected margin 28 points. The game was a little bit closer. They got lucky that it was that close, and they only lost by what, 22?
22 or 23, yeah.
2019, 1% win expectancy at Clemson. 1%. They played to keep that game super close and to cover the spread. It didn't seem like they were actually trying to win at any point. 0% against Alabama. 0% at LSU. Let's go to 2020. Pretty much everything great, except for 0% at Alabama. Expected point margin, 28. They kept it to what, 20? No, they lost by 28.
Yeah.
Look, when they play the best team in the West, they get crushed. They have to open it up if they actually want to win the West and do something. they're really good at winning, 8, 9. I think they can get to 10 without beating Bama. But I think if you're Jimbo, they gave him that empty, like the trophy with the year left blank on it. You got to do something. The sport is getting more explosive around you.
Frank Beamer had one of those too. All those stats analytics are awesome. Just look around college football. Look at what's winning national championships. Look at what LSU did. Look at what Ohio State does. Look at what Alabama does. Kirby Smart, I think, was a similar stubborn mindset. We're going to win with defense. We're going to win with physical play. We're going to, ball control. He woke up. I just don't know if Jimbo will make that evolution. I hope he does, because I think then they're a really, really dangerous program, but I just don't know. But I'm with you, Bud. Like you should be looking around and be able to make that change.
Hold on, Danny. I'm zooming in on some images here. Did you guys find the asterisk on LSU's 2019 national title trophy for throwing RPOs down the field or using motion? Let me pull up Bama's trophy. Oh, no. Wait, no, it's not. So if you're not taking advantage of the college ball rules, you're only hurting yourself.
Without a doubt.
Count them up.
Speaking of LSU, win total for 2021 set at 8.5 at Caesar Sportsbook, over at +100, under at -120. Your non-conference slate, we start the season week 1. Awesome game. Like, it's an 8:30 kickoff, and I was sort of planning out my week 1 Saturday already because I'm an absolute lunatic. And I was like, that 8:30 kickoff on Fox is going to be a 4.5-hour game, especially the way that LSU is going to play football and the way that UCLA might get caught into it. So that might as well be a little SEC Pac-12 after dark. McNeese State, Central Michigan, ULM round out the non-conference slate. Draw from the East. That Florida rivalry game is going to be in Baton Rouge. Then they go to the big checkout line, Kroger Field, to play Kentucky. So 8.5 for a team that Max Johnson will be in at quarterback after the Miles Brennan injury. We've got a wide receiver room that's absolutely loaded, an offensive line that's got some questions, defensive front that probably has some questions, though I like them on the back end. Everyone's talking about a bounce back. The AP Top 25 was released today, and among the teams that have made the largest jump from where they finished last year to where they start this year, there is a lot of confidence that Ed Orgeron is going to right the ship after making all the staff changes. Do you believe that? And if so, how does that influence? If so, or if not, how does that influence your pick at 8.5?
I think LSU is going to be better than the team we saw last year. I don't think it's going to be the team we saw in 2019. So I don't love either side of this. My numbers have 8-4 as being slightly more likely than 9-3, and then 7-5 being more likely than 10-2, and so on. So I'm going with the under, but I do think this is an 8-4 LSU team with room to grow if things click and things go right to the 9-3, 10-2, and then maybe being the second best team in the West. I don't think they're competing with Alabama this year, but when you look at the schedule, it's not easy, but it could be a lot worse. Like the Eastern draw, obviously, you're always getting Florida if you're LSU, but at least it's at home. Kentucky on the road, that's not fun, but I don't think that's an unwinnable game for LSU by any stretch. I think that the non-con UCLA on the road, that could be a kind of a sneaky, tricky spot. And I think that we're going to get a good idea of what this LSU team has in its very first game, because UCLA is a team that I do think can put a real scare into LSU, if not pull off kind of a week 1 upset on them, which might send the season spiraling. But I do think if LSU wins that game, they're set up pretty well over the next month to at least get off to a 5-0 or 5-1 kind of start before really getting into the meat of SEC play. So I think 8-4 is a very likely outcome here.
I'm going over. I just like, because I think the variance is like 10-2 or 6-6, just sort of the which way, whether you're going to believe in the fact that Max Johnson and these wide receivers are going to come out and light it up, or whether you think that the belief that the ship has been righted ends up totally tanking and this goes in the opposite direction. I'm going to say Alabama is a certain loss. Potential losses: Florida, Texas A&M, at Ole Miss. Calling my shot at UCLA. Spread's only 4.5. I mean, that's 100% a spot, especially in week 1, where if the Bruins win that game, no surprise at all to me. So out of Florida, Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, at UCLA, my question in my analysis is, can LSU get 2? They need to be able to have everything clicking and be really dominant offensively for that to happen. I think they can, just because of their speed and athleticism on the outside and their commitment to really running up tempo and spreading the field out. So can they get 2 out of Florida, Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, at UCLA? My answer is yes. I think we go 9-3 and go over the total.
Bud, you want to take a swing at it?
So I tried not to talk numbers quite as much on the last episode. And if the number is generally pretty even across the board, I'm just going to talk team. But this is a case where the number is not even across the board. If you want to bet the under, Will Hill's a great place to bet this, right? You can get under 8.5 at minus $1.20. There are also 8s out there at minus $1.25. I happen to think 8, like Tom, is the most likely number they land on. If they're a top 10 team, like quality wise, they'll fly over this total. I think if they're a top 10 team, they'll go 9-3 or 10-2. If they're a top 25 type team, I think that this is going to be an under. I kind of have them there in that top 15 range personally in my stuff. I think getting rid of Bo Pelini is a big deal. And I think they will upgrade there with basically anybody else. They're trying to go back to the Joe Brady, Joe Burrow days. We'll see how well that works. I think they have absolutely tons of receiver talent. But I actually have some questions along the lines of scrimmage, right? I think this team will stop the pass. I think they will throw the ball very well. But last year, they did not run the ball efficiently. And their run defense last year, I mean, guys, was pretty atrocious. They were, I had it here. Let me pull it back up. All right. Last year, 110th in rushing success rate allowed, right? 109th in rushing marginal efficiency allowed. These are really bad numbers. Glenn Logan's going to miss some time at defensive tackle. They lost their starting left tackle to Kentucky due to transfer. I'm just not sure that they can control games along the lines of scrimmage as well as we typically think an LSU team can. And, so I think, okay, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, Auburn, Ole Miss, UCLA, or at UCLA rather, A&M and Florida, they're going to lose the Bama game in Tuscaloosa. So to me, they need to go 5-2 in that stretch to hit the over on this. And I think 4-3 is just more likely than 5-2. So go ahead and give me the under.
I really hope I'm wrong on this one because I was just talking to Max Johnson's mom and dad, Tallahassee. Love them. Big bad Brad Johnson, my guy, Florida State. His wife, Nikki. They're really excited, as they should be. I'm not really worried about Max Johnson. I'm worried about some of the issues Bud brought up. I'm also worried about what we saw last year. I mean, I think it's easy to gloss over, but Bud was talking about the line issues up front, and they got pushed around by Auburn, 48-11. They lost to 11. Texas A&M, typical low score, and they got blown out by Alabama. Weren't even close. I know they beat Florida, but it was kind of a fluky win when Florida probably thought they were just going to waltz out there and just run them over. And then they had a pretty, fun, entertaining game against Ole Miss, but their defense didn't stop anything. I'm worried about the coordinators. Both coordinators come in without play calling experience, having called each side of the ball. I know what they're trying to do, and that concerns me in rekindling the Joe Brady magic. What if Joe Brady was a one of a kind? What if he's the genius behind all of this? And Joe Burrow, the combination of them two were perfect. There's something about knowing the plays and knowing the playbook versus in-game, making adjustments, knowing when to call certain plays, knowing when to make slight tweaks to formations, knowing how to game plan. I don't know. And it's not to say I don't think Jake Peetz could replicate some of that magic, but I need to see it first before I take an over win total on this one. I will do this for my guy, Brad. I'll take Max Johnson 50-1 for a Heisman Trophy winner, much like I did with Desmond Ridder. Like some of these teams that I'm a little bit down on replicating past success, if they do, if Jake Peetz works and this team is closer to 10 wins, I think it's going to be in large part because Max Johnson throwing to a lot of those weapons, just like Joe Burrow did, will be getting a lot of attention for it. But I'm going to take the under 8.5.
Where do you draw the line as teams that you could reasonably see winning the division? Is the line here or is the line with the next team?
It's not beyond Alabama.
Yeah, mine's not past
Alabama. Beyond,
okay.
Because 9-3 doesn't win you the division.
Right. I guess if Alabama's down,
let's say
is
Bryce
it
Young gets hurt.
only A&M and LSU?
Yes.
You mentioned it. I mean, Bryce Young if he gets nicked, there's not much depth there. So if that happened, or if something was a disaster and he was a total bust, then it brings the others into play. But I think this is as far as I would go too.
Yeah, without a doubt. Coming up on the other side, we move to the other edge of the Mendoza line. We look at Ole Miss, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Arkansas next.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
Ole Miss landing in the were they top 25 AP? No, top 25 coaches poll, I believe.
Yep.
Who
just
cares?
7.5 is the win total at Caesars Sportsbook, -135 to the over, +115 to the under. Non-conference starts with a neutral against Louisville, Austin P, Tulane, Liberty, the draw from the East, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. Danny, we were talking about like what's the easiest, like trying to find 6 wins right there. I guess neutral against Louisville is the most intimidating spot that you have because Tennessee and Vanderbilt, 2 first-year coaches. So, if 5-1 at a minimum. So we'll say something goes wrong against Louisville, or maybe it's Liberty. Can you go 3-3 against the division? Maybe you frame this in a different way. Which way are we going to go with 7.5 for the Rebels?
Chip, you go first. I already know where you're going.
Over. Yeah, absolutely. Why? Just because of the way I set it up?
Yeah.
You've alluded to it like in your little secret way like 5 times already.
You've got them beating A&M. We know that. So it's like I have to figure you're going over with them.
So it's upset specials. LSU and have rated as being better than Ole Miss, but I don't think it is with the kind that makes those games unwinnable. I will give them Auburn as a win. Maybe that's a hint. I will give them Arkansas. Admit that the Egg Bowl could swing this, but as I'm sitting here, a little bit unsure of Mississippi State and recognizing that I might be.
Is it our connection or Chip's?
I think it's
Chip.
Chip.
Chip, you went away for a second.
Ghost
there.
If you want to come back,
returns.
Let's see.
Ghost of Barton's internet.
Are we back? Are we here?
Yes.
I think
There
you're
you
back.
go.
Yeah,
You're
this has
back.
been a little choppy for like 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, I'm Ethernetted
I thought
up.
it was me.
We're all hardline. So anyway, you know what it is? It's Mike Leach. As I'm sitting here talking about how the Egg Bowl could swing in it, and I don't trust Mississippi State. So yeah, upset specials with LSU and Texas A&M coming to Oxford. Auburn and Arkansas wins. Egg Bowl could swing it. It all comes up with an over for me at 7.5.
You're automatic versus Liberty?
I think so. Fun game, but at the end of 4 quarters, I got to think Ole Miss wins that game.
I'm with you on the over. I just I look at the schedule and I look at that offense, and I think that they're going to be able to score enough points to win a lot of these games, even if they're going to allow a lot of them right back. I think they can win that Louisville game. I think Austin P and Tulane are wins. So I've already got them 3-0 to start before they eventually lose to Alabama. But then I have them beating Arkansas. I have them winning it, or capable of winning at Tennessee. I think they can beat LSU, although I'm not favoring them there. But I think they can beat Auburn. I think they will beat Liberty. I think they can beat A&M. I think they will beat Vandy. And I think they can beat Mississippi State on the road. So I don't think 8-4 is all that out of line for this Rebels team. So that's where I'm going. I'm going over.
I'm on the same. I've said it a couple times. The offense that Lane runs with a quarterback who I really like a lot, Matt Corral, I think the offense is going to see improvement, even though they did lose some incredible talent. But I just feel I have trust that the offense is going to put up similar numbers. I think you have to get better by default as one of the worst defenses in the country. They will get better on the defensive side of the ball. I think this is a team that could surprise some people. I think you could see a win. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I mentioned it earlier with Alabama. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if this was Lane Kiffin's like signature win early in the career. He knocks off Nick Saban and then trolls him right after on Twitter. I wouldn't pick that to happen now, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happened either. You heard me take the under on LSU. I'm kind of concerned which direction they go. This team went toe-to-toe with them last year with no defense. Could they get them possibly this year at home? Yes, there's another one. And then you mentioned the non-cons, which I think the Liberty game's kind of scary a little bit. You know, Hugh Freeze would love nothing more, but it's not like it's going to sneak up on you because of that storyline. So I'm going to take the over as well.
I'm also going to go with the over here. So for me, they basically just need to get to 5. They're not going to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So they need to get to 5-3 in this stretch. At Tennessee, at Mississippi State, at Auburn, A&M at home, LSU at home, Louisville neutral site, I believe. Liberty at home, and Arkansas at home. And I just think that is, I think that should be priced at like probably minus $1.40. So I'm very slightly to the over here. We've all been very positive on Ole Miss, so allow me to kind of be the hate and ass bud here for a second. I think there are some concerns I have with this team. Number one, I don't love their defensive depth. They are confident that their starters on defense will be improved, and I think they have reason for confidence. But I don't think their defensive depth is very good at all. So if injuries mount, they could really, they could crater pretty hard. I also think it's interesting how some of these teams play them down the stretch after Arkansas kind of laid that blueprint out. Right now, LSU was a total mess on defense, as was Vanderbilt, obviously, in South Carolina. I mean, that's kind of the game that got Will Muschamp fired. But Arkansas just dropped like 9 into coverage, and they played them almost like one of these Big 12 teams, right? Kind of how Iowa State started doing to folks about 3 or 4 years ago. It's like, all right, cool. Take all these little shorties. That's fine. Can you execute in the red zone, in the compressed space? And they struggled to do so. I think that was the game that Corral threw 5 picks or something like that. It was something really crazy.
Yeah.
Indiana kind of did something similar to them in the bowl game. Mississippi State, even though they won that game and they beat Indiana as well, they kind of did something similar there. I wonder if the better teams won't kind of follow that blueprint a little bit more and just make this team play red zone roulette. I'm not confident the offense will be better than it was last year. I think losing Elijah Moore is a big deal. But I do think that they will get to 8 wins, more likely than 7 wins. So go ahead, give me the over.
It was 6 interceptions, 2 touchdowns against 6 interceptions against Arkansas, a feat that he nearly matched with 5 interceptions against LSU later in the year.
So they come in bunches with old Matty because he went like a month without throwing one. And
then they all came at once.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
First year of Bryan Harsin at Auburn. Over under win total at Caesars Sportsbook set at around 7.0. Plus 125 to the over, minus 145 to the under. The non-conference has a tough game at Penn State, but the rest of it, Akron, Alabama State, Georgia State. The East draw, the rivalry game against Georgia, will be at home. And then you're going to be going up to Columbia to take on nice guy Shane Beamer and South Carolina. Which way are we going for year 1 of Bryan Harsin and Auburn?
No idea. Like the numbers at 7, that's probably right. But as far as even over or under, I don't really know if either side's better. I guess for the purposes of the show, I'll go slightly over. But I don't really like it either. I look at the schedule. I see right off the bat. I think they're going to lose at Penn State. I think they'll lose at LSU, and I think they're going to lose at Texas A&M. Those are going to be 3 really difficult road games. They do have 2 more comfortable road games against Arkansas and South Carolina that should be winnable. The home slate, you get Alabama at home, so that's cool. But I don't know if Bryan Harsin's first Iron Bowl. We'll see how that works. Mississippi State at home, that's winnable. Ole Miss at home, that's winnable. Georgia at home, probably not winnable, but I can't rule it out because rivalries are crazy. I think the rest of the non-con outside of Penn State, very doable with Akron, Alabama State, and Georgia State. Those should be 3 wins. So can they get to 5 wins in conference? That sounds tough. 4 wins, tough, but doable. 3 wins, not as tough, but still kind of doable. I'm leaning over, but I think 7-5 is the answer here, and I'm really not confident in any of it.
I really like their corners. I think their backers are good. I think they made some interesting hires, but I love the under here. And find this at a book where you do not actually have to play all 12 of the games. Find this at a book that counts forfeits. I've already pounded the under 7.5 here. I would still pound under 7. I think there's a decent chance this team can miss a bowl. I'm not buying at all. I think the transition from Malzahn's offense to Harsin's is going to be challenging. Yeah. And I mean, they lost Newkirk to Florida, and Florida's raving about what a good transfer he was. You know, like they do have some good guys on the defensive line too. It should still be a good defense, but man, I have 6-6 as a lot more likely than 8-4. I mean, at South Carolina is not a lock. Mississippi State at home is not a lock. At Arkansas, definitely not a lock. Ole Miss at home, probably a coin flip. At LSU, they're dogs. At Penn State, they're decent sized dogs. Probably 8, I would think that it'll close at.
Round, yeah.
Georgia at home, they're dogs. I don't think they can play with Georgia. At A&M, they're dogs. Bama, no chance. Man, I'm not buying. It would not shock me, by the way. Let's do a show bet. This is kind of crazy. What odds would you get me that Harsin only gets 2 years at Auburn?
At Auburn?
Like, can I get like 10 to 1?
If you want to 1.
No.
Can I get 5 to 1 that he only lasts 2 years?
No, it's Auburn, man.
Yeah.
All right, the buyout there is not high.
Can I ask a technical question here?
Yeah.
So you've alluded to it. Forfeits might be a possibility in this one. Not one of the most vaccinated teams in the SEC. The Big 12 has announced their policy. The Pac-12 has announced theirs. The SEC has not, right? So
no, the ACC had not. The SEC came out and said it's forfeit. We're not doing cancellations and reschedulings.
All right, I think that's a dumb policy that all these conferences are going to be regretting once it gets there. But if you watch what happened to Ohio State last year, like, why does it matter? As long as if you look the part, you can still make the playoffs, so it doesn't matter. What do you think the books will? When you asked about,
it depends on which book.
Okay, so because if
check with your book if it says have to play all 12 games or if forfeits count.
Gotcha. I'll take the under as well. I thought it was a good hire at first, but then it just feels like a little bit too forced. Going with Bobo without any previous relationship because he was in the SEC. Going with Derek Mason without any previous relationship because he was in the SEC. The other thing, too, is as much as we bashed Gus Malzahn for his lack of development in quarterbacks, are we sure Bo Nix is just going to flourish under a new regime? Like, he's all of a sudden going to be there? I'm not at all. I don't know if there are many great options there as well. I think you see a whole lot of Tank Bigsby, who's great, but when was the last time we saw a running back carry their team in the recent memory with the way the game is run now? So schedule's brutal. I don't think it's going to be a great year. I'm going to take the under as well. I think I would feel better if you could find it at 7.5 and then take the under, because 7-5 probably feels like where they are, but I'll lean the under.
Kerryon Johnson is the last time I remember a running back just and it was Auburn, throwing the entire team on his back. So as I sorted out my wins and my losses and moved them from side to side, I came down to Ole Miss and Mississippi State, which are both fortunately at home, and then Arkansas on the road. And the way that it was coming up, I needed Auburn to go 3-0, and that answer's no. I don't believe that they're going to go 3-0 against Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Arkansas. So I am also on the under.
Count 'em up!
Mississippi State, around 6.0, -115 to the over, -105 to the under at Caesar Sportsbook. Louisiana Tech, NC State, at Memphis, and Tennessee State is your non-conference. The draw from the East, you go to Vanderbilt and you host Kentucky. So Mike Leach, year 2, it felt like we had 2 seasons of Mike Leach just within year 1, because there was the record-breaking win against LSU, and then there's kind of everything that followed. A team at the end of the season that was really relying on a defense. We lose a lot from that defense. What are we going to be doing with the Bulldogs here in 2021?
I'm going under because as far as non-conference schedules are concerned, starting the season for an SEC team to start the season with Louisiana Tech, NC State, and at Memphis, that's a pretty tough, that's tricky non-conference schedule for Mississippi State team that wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire last year and had some problems. So I think those are 3 difficult games. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose at least 1, if not 2 of them. And then you open SEC play with LSU at Texas A&M. Then you get a bye to rest up to get Alabama. We don't even know what's going to be left of this team by the time they get to the second half of their schedule. That is a very rough start. So because of that, I mean, it gets easier in the second half when you get the run of games against Vandy, Kentucky, Arkansas, and then Auburn and Tennessee State. But man, I don't know what's going to be left of this team. I don't have a ton of faith in from what I saw last year. And I worry, we've talked about this a little bit. Like, I worry that our expectations for this Mississippi State program have been skewed too much by what Dan Mullen was able to do there. And maybe we kind of underestimate the job that Dan Mullen did there at times because he was consistently winning games. But this is a tough place to win at. Mike Leach has done a lot of has won at tough places before, so I can't rule it out the possibility. But I see 5-7 as being more likely than a 6-6 or 7-5 year for the Bulldogs this year. So I'm going under.
So wait, real quick, Denny, or excuse me, Tom, you see 5-7 as being more likely than 6-6 too?
Yeah.
Okay. So we might see this on the Locks pod.
We might.
Under. I mean, same. I don't need to. We're late in the show. We're running close on time. I can just.
I'll take the under. By the way, if you're an SEC fan who hated when I joined this pod and you left a 1-star review and like, I'm going to stop listening to it, but then you really couldn't give it up because you love Chip and Tom, and then you came back with Bud. If you want some ammunition to use against me, go look at my tweets when Mike Leach was lighting up LSU's defense in that week 1. Oh, look at this. Finally, they see an air raid. Look what happens. And then didn't look so great at the end of the season. So go have some fun with that. I do think you'll see a better offense, but I'm more aligned with Bud. We're saying maybe this program, maybe we should appreciate what Dan Mullen did, perennially challenging, getting 9 wins, having this team in the top 3, I think, at one time, which was clearly a little bit lofty. But I just think this is more of a turnaround, so I'm going to take the under too.
So I completely agree with everybody who's gone under so far. I'm also taking the under. Now, look, obviously it's a noble cause for Lane Kiffin to be out there encouraging folks to get vaccinated. But it's also Lane Kiffin, troll god Lane Kiffin. What percentage of Lane Kiffin going on like Good Morning America and stuff to talk about Ole Miss being 100% vaccinated is trolling Mississippi State?
Always
which is not.
Be recruiting.
Yeah. Find a book that counts forfeits as games. Take the under. Also, I think the one concern I had about Mississippi State that's coming through, I'm going to keep this quick, is that I don't think the defensive talent in a lot of the leagues that he was playing in was near as good as it is in the SEC. And you could usually find a matchup to where, okay, hey,
Just
we can find
it the hell out.
We can pick on this guy. But in the SEC, most teams have enough DBs who can all run. There's not as many ducks that you can just pick on. And last year, to compound matters, you could actually get home if you had a good defensive line by rushing 3 against Mississippi State. Now, I don't think that'll be the case this year. I think it should be better up front, but maybe not that much better. And so I don't have 5-7 as that much more likely than 6-6, but I do have it considerably more likely than 7-5.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Bringing the SEC West to a close with Arkansas. The win total is at 5.5 at Caesars Sportsbook, -105 to the over, -115 to the under. You've got Rice, Texas, Georgia Southern, Arkansas Pine Bluff for the non-conference. The draw from the East at Georgia and Missouri. Nice to have Missouri and Mississippi State games both at home, just because I think you would circle those as being within the winnable realm. Where do we think we're going with Sam Pittman year 2, exceeding expectations year 1? Is this a course correction? How are we feeling about this squad?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this when I was talking about Illinois on the Big Ten West show, because I feel like Illinois this year is in the same kind of situation Arkansas was in last year, where I feel like the first year could exceed expectations, but also kind of set things up for somewhat of a disappointing second season, because I think the team was better equipped to win right away. And that's kind of how I feel about this Arkansas team. I think that they won some games. They played better than any of us probably really expected them to last year, but I don't know if that's really going to carry into year 2. I think there could be a slight step backward. And I think especially, like Felipe Franks played really well for them in that offense last year. I have questions at the quarterback spot. Do we know who the starter is? I know, I think KJ Jefferson is the favorite, but has that been named yet?
Not to my
I haven't seen it named. I'm just assuming it.
Yeah. But I think that I don't know enough about KJ Jefferson yet to be really super confident in it. I know that he has an awesome target in Treylon Burks, but I just think that defensively, this was a team that was solid, but not great, but got good results last year. And I don't know if they're going to be able to maintain that again into 2021. So I'm going under. It's not going to be like a lock under, but I do think that 5-7 is far more likely than a bowl game in 2021.
Man, I am just waiting on this to see if a 6 will pop. Somebody told me they found a 6 earlier in the preseason, and I can't find it. I looked at 9 different books today, can't find a 6. If a 6 pops on this, it's unlocked. Second mortgage time, right? Like, no doubt about it. But at 5.5, I've already gone under on Mississippi State. I've already gone under on Auburn. I think just knowing the general principle that teams line 5, 5.5, and oftentimes 6 go over a decent bit of the time, although not as much in the SEC historically, according to Lockie Lockerson. Shout out. I think I have to take the over, but Tom's points are really good here. I have a lot of questions about the depth, particularly at receiver. I don't think their backups are nearly as explosive as their best guys. They called KJ Jefferson, quote, average in his first scrimmage. I would say he's probably about average. He's had better days, he's had worse days, Pittman said, but he wasn't live. He's a good runner, and he's really big, so they will run him more. I think they can get to a bowl. I'm going to go over, but barely.
Man, I just imagined him saying it in that same voice that he said, yeah, he was about average. Y'all let me take my shoes off. Some of y'all even let me take my socks off. I appreciate that. I'm on the over, Bud. Like you said, I'm a little bit caught in my own trap based on how I've played out the rest of this. Basically, the Missouri, Mississippi State, and Auburn, like that Auburn game is at home too, depending on where that Auburn team is. I'm going over. It is one of my least confident picks of this show, and it is definitely one that I felt like I needed to do to balance because I had too many unders in the SEC, where unders are hard to come by because of the way they set up the non-conference schedule. So I'm on over 5.5.
I can't take the under because you talked about the anti-SEC bias. I have almost all unders, so I have to take an over. I don't think it's a great sign one of your best receivers is like, yeah, I'm going to go over to Oklahoma because I think I'm going to have better exposure and a better chance to win. And also probably not thrilled with the quarterbacks he's going to be catching from. So Mike Woods takes his talents over there. Literally the day after, the Arkansas football Instagram account is like, there's our guy. No one else is better. And then he leaves the program. Much like Bud, if you could shop around and get this at a better number, I would hammer the under. But for the show purposes, I will take the over. I think this is a 6-16.
Was it 70% of the time 5.5s do end up getting to 6, but not as much in the SEC?
But not as much in the SEC because if you listen to Lockie, there were really fewer coin flip games, right? Usually the SEC teams schedule 3-0 at least in the non-conference, sometimes 4-0, and then you have games that are just totally unwinnable. Like we're not sitting here listing, hey, as long as they can win 8 of these 10, right? Like in most of these examples, it's like, hey, as long as they can win 3 of these 5, because there's not that there's a lot of predetermined outcomes.
Is Texas a win for Arkansas?
No.
100% no?
I mean, what?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
Now,
I can't rule it out. I just don't think it
It would
happens.
be hilarious. If it would be hilarious if a 5-7 Arkansas team still beats Texas. But, there's a lot of comedy to be going around.
That game in Arkansas, or is it one of those neutral sites?
It's either
it's
neutral or
Fayetteville.
Fayetteville. It's Fayetteville?
I think so.
Hold on, let me check. I just had it up.
Texas minus 3.5.
That's a small
Yeah, it's in
line.
Fayetteville.
Winnable. Let's go. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Coming up on Thursday, win totals, locks. Get your cards together. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.